welcome to Tech Talks, the People and Planet podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brian Levine, the founder of Nodal. Brian, hi, how are you?
Hi, Lee. It's good to see you again. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you so much. And Brian, I'm really looking forward to learning more on this one. It's a unique subject, not only to the show, but in general. This is all about surrogacy, isn't it? And a platform that connects surrogates and intended parents. Tell us a little bit more. What's the company mission here? What's the problem that you're solving?
So, it's really interesting is that right now, as we're in the height of American politics, everyone's talking about IVF and everyone's talking about in vitro fertilization. It doesn't matter which candidate people are looking at, both are talking about in vitro fertilization. But when you take a step back and you open the aperture, IVF includes many different paths to parenthood depending on who these individuals are. And there's an entire segment of the population that cannot carry for a host of different reasons. And by carry, I mean get pregnant. So those are potentially people born without a uterus, such as people with a medical condition where they're born without one, or a man who's born without one, or it could be a same-sex male couple. Or it could be people who shouldn't get pregnant, right? Those are women who've had the unfortunate diagnosis of cancer or have a health reason why they can't get pregnant. Or people who can't stay pregnant, who have recurrent pregnancy loss, who have recurrent miscarriages and IVF failures. Or people who don't want to be pregnant because it's going to get in the way of whatever they're doing, or maybe they're exposed to something that they shouldn't be exposed to while pregnant. Regardless, there's this huge segment of the population that needs to deploy the resources of gestational surrogacy for helping them to start, grow, or complete their families. And what's crazy is in the United States, we're one of the few countries on earth where it's allowed to be compensated, right? Where the surrogate is allowed to be compensated for her efforts. But in the United States, it's also really unregulated. And there's really a lack of control. So as we take a step back and we say, what is Nodal? Nodal is the leading online surrogacy platform that's helping to make gestational surrogacy more affordable and more accessible, but most importantly, more transparent. Because it feels like today in the United States, it's an incredibly opaque industry.
Okay, super interesting. And so unwrap that a little bit more for us then in terms of the actual product itself. How does that work to solve the problem, I guess?
So in the traditional model of gestational surrogacy in the United States, you have to utilize a resource called an agency. And the way to think about an agency is that the surrogacy agency is the middleman. They're the ones who are connecting the gestational surrogate with the potential intended parent. And they kind of own that relationship together. And that relationship, by the way, then has to be offered or presented to the clinic where the intended parent is already a patient. So there's always this third customer that's kind of sitting there, right? There's the gestational carrier, the intended parent, and then the clinic that has to approve the entire match. In the current ecosystem today, an intended parent calls up an agency and says, please help me. Help me find my future surrogate. And what they do is they go through their lists of individuals that they've screened or vetted, and then they ultimately put together a match where they basically assign a surrogate to an intended parent based upon the wishes that the intended parent is looking for.
Okay.
That's really one-sided. And if you take a look at dating apps, for example, there's a reason that Bumble has been wildly successful.
Yeah.
And the reason that Bumble has worked really well is that they allow the person who takes the most risk, the female, to actually have the opportunity to make the first move. So they pick who they want to date first. So we took a little lesson from that. And on the Nodal platform, we meet intended parents and we screen gestational carriers, but then we let the gestational carriers pick from the intended parents that we've met and screened already. And so we basically flipped the model upside down.
Yeah.
The reason that we've done that on our platform is that we want to empower the surrogates to understand that they have autonomy, they have agency, they have the ability to pick who they want to work with.
Yeah.
And for the intended parents, we're actually preventing heartbreak. So instead of having the intended parents say, I want to use her, I want to work with her, I want to do this and that. And by the way, I hate it when people say I want to use a surrogate, right? They work with surrogates. Instead, what we do is we allow the gestational carriers to say, I want to partner with these intended parents. I want to work with these intended parents. So when the intended parent gets the phone call, they already know that they've been selected by a gestational carrier. They already know that there's a pre-test probability that this thing's going to be a good match because they already like each other. So it's great.
Wow. Sounds very cool. And you know, from a user point of view, does it kind of look and feel like a sort of Bumble thing as well, you know, with the sliding and everything?
Well, there's no app here, right? So there's no swiping left or right. But what we actually are is we're a true tech platform. And so the stational carriers are presented 3 intended parent profiles, and they select from those. And if they don't find someone who they, you know, kind of meets their fancy, or it's someone that they really think is the right fit for them, then they get to select another 3 to take a look at. But we present them 3 at a time.
Got it. Interesting stuff. So Brian, what's your story? What's, you know, how did you arrive at founding Nodal?
So I'm a geek, right? Like, I'm a tech geek. And, you know, it's important to recognize that first and foremost, I'm a tech geek who also happens to be a doctor. And so gestational surrogacy became legalized in New York State in 2021, and I reside in New York City. Before 2021, it was legal in 47 other states across America. But in 2021, it became legalized, and I was super jazzed. I was like super psyched because I'm the only boy in my medical practice. So I already had a lot of same-sex male couples and single mothers by choice and people who needed to proceed with gestational surrogacy.
Sure.
And then very quickly, I learned that as it became permissive in New York State, the costs just started escalating. The costs were actually going almost in an unchecked manner, where 5 years before it was legalized, it was costing around $75,000 end to end. And then it went up to $150 to $200 to $250 almost overnight. And the only thing that happened, the only line that you could draw between those 2 points was supply and demand economics.
Yeah.
Because we knew now that the demand was outpacing the supply of gestational carriers that were available. So either I could be complicit and be part of the problem, or I could try to find a solution. And so as someone who's a geek, who also has a strong, you know, code of ethics, I felt like it was my personal responsibility to help fix this system, because otherwise I was just as bad as everyone else in it. And that's when Nodal got started.
Wow, I love it. Okay, so you guys, you started in 2021?
Yeah, so we started fundraising in 21, and we did some pre-investigational work in 21. I really wanted to pressure test the industry. So there's about 400 plus agencies, and we called the lion's share. You know, we had 3 little employee together like meetings where we met a team, and we made a game plan of those first 3 short meetings of, does this make sense? What do you think? And let's get data. And then once we had those 3 one-hour meetings, we were like, okay, let's get data. Because what we realized from those short interactions as we kept digging was we needed to get large swaths of data to actually understand the industry that we were digging in. So we met in the September of 21, and by October of 21, we were off to the research bench. And we were calling agencies every day, and we were mystery shopping, and we were talking to clinics, and we were talking to intended parents and gestational carriers. And we spent 4 months just doing data, data acquisition, and really structuring that data down. And then in February of 22, we did our first fundraise. We raised our pre-seed round. And then we were off to the races, because once you have money in the bank, you know that you can create a company.
Yeah, absolutely. But Brian, it's rarely plain sailing. I always ask this question on the show because we've got a good network of fellow founders that listen in as well. Share some of the challenges that you've had to navigate along the way, and you know how you've done that.
So, you know, I kind of would say that as a founder, I'm a 44-year-old founder.
Yeah.
Right, not a 24-year-old founder. So the first thing is that you realize that there's a language of founders out there. And when you talk to venture capital funds specifically, they're very used to hearing the stories of the 24-year-olds who are like, we're going to democratize everything. We're going to do, you know, big bombastic ideas.
Yeah.
And here I am saying, like, I have this niche area that has a huge TAM, and I see a linear path to how we can fix it. So learning how to talk to these VCs was really one of the first lessons.
Interesting.
The second was learning how to create an elevator pitch is actually incredibly difficult. Learning how to capture the person you're talking to bring them up to speed on a highly complex topic that they don't know anything about without boring them.
Yeah.
Keeping them engaged while letting them know there's an opportunity there is a real challenge and an art. And so I did a lot of practicing of how did I want the pitch to go? How did I want to talk to them? And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I learned, one of the biggest lessons was don't send your deck. Because when you send your deck ahead of the meeting, they already are going to read through it for about a minute. Then when you're talking, that's when they're really going to read it and they're not paying attention to you.
Sure.
So instead, send your deck after you talk to them so that they have the supporting materials for what you talked about. And I think the other thing is, it's kindergarten rules. Show up on time, show up prepared, be nice, be respectful, and recognize that you know your company and your product better than anybody else.
Yes.
And not only does that have to show, you actually need to be able to convey this in a simplistic, linear manner so that people can actually understand what you're asking them for, right? As much as you're dating VCs, they're dating you. And it needs to be a marriage, because once they're on your cap table, you're married for a very long time.
It's good advice. I love that one about the deck as well. I mean, when you've heard it, it makes total sense. But everyone just fires the deck first, don't they? And
oh, it's the classic email of, oh, it's a pleasure to meet you. Please see my deck.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's almost like, it's like kissing on the first date. You leave nothing left to the imagination.
Yeah. What comes next then, Brian? It seems like it's good news for the business so far. Share what's happening with the listeners.
So, we're really proud of the fact that we just celebrated our 2-year birthday from launch. So we launched in September of 2022, and now we just celebrated 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So here are some fun metrics. So in the last 2 years, we've matched over 100 intended parents with gestational carriers.
Wow.
The average agency in America does 25 a year, and we've doubled that. So we've done 100 in 2 years.
Wow.
Second, we've saved our intended parents collectively over $5 million of agency fees. That's a huge number, because that's a lot of diapers and a lot of formula. 3, we've collectively saved our intended parents close to a century of waiting time. That's huge.
Oh, that is huge.
So people are having a baby on our platform before they get off the wait list at our competitor. That's a big deal. Third, as I went through this fundraising process for our seed round this spring, I was very careful who we worked with, right? Remember I said to you before that you can't, once they're on your cap table, you're married.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that your venture capital groups are representative of who you are as a company and who you're building. So we are incredibly fortunate and lucky that we partnered with NFX. And NFX out of Silicon Valley is the single largest seed stage venture capital fund in America.
Okay.
And the reason we partnered with them is that because what you want your VC to do is to help open you up to other avenues of collaboration and resources so that you can save the capital, so that you can actually lower your monthly burn, so you can increase the profitability. So we've had a great VC partner. But you asked me what's next. And what's next is the core business, which is helping gestational carriers meet their intended parents in a cost-efficient and effective way. And we're scaling the business. So some of the exciting things on the horizon is that we're going deep with clinics now. So initially, we looked at that third customer, right? The carrier, the intended parents, and the clinic. And we looked at that third customer as passive, right? We would just hand them records and hand them a narrative and hope they approve. In 24, what we've realized is that that passive customer needs to be an active customer. And active customer means you actually need to nurture that relationship. You need to actually work with them so that you're engaging them, because they have the ability to sync the product or make the product sell. And so it's really working on that 3-sided stool, right? The 3 legs of the stool together.
Sure.
To make sure that we have stability along the way. Some of the other things in 25 that we're super excited for is going deep. So I think that, I would be myopic to not discuss AI is out there. And we are using a ton of AI right now to help us move more efficiently and more effectively on the medical record review. And there's a lot of great resources that are out there today, and we're pressure checking a lot of them. But from a big picture perspective, 25 is going to be our tech year. And I think what's going to come out at the end of 25 is you're going to see some really cool technology under the hood.
Love it. Looking forward to learning a lot more in 25 as well. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Guys, this has been Brian Levine from Nodal.
Well, thank you for your time, Lee. And I really look forward to listening to more of your podcasts, because I learned so much from every host and every guest that you have. So thank you.
Thank you.